Let's pray that we keep in mind that returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. That was from Martin Luther King. Teach us to use our freedom to help to preserve and strengthen the freedom of all by respecting and upholding the laws, by supporting our law enforcement agencies, by informing ourselves on current issues, by voting regularly and wisely, and by honoring the rights of other people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Past President Gordon Fell. Past President Ed Gold, are you here?
Hey, I am present.
You are. Okay. Are you going to lead us in song?
I will lead you in a song, and it's a song everybody should know. It's America the Beautiful, and the words are on the screen. Oh, beautiful for space,
The sky.
forever waves of green, for purple mountain majesty, above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay. Advice to all of you, keep your day jobs. Okay. All right. Visiting Rotarians and guests. We have visiting Rotarians here. Abe, would you like to introduce yourself to all of us?
Of course, Mark, thank you. Glad to be here. My name is Abe Hagigat. My office is right here on Westwood Boulevard, maybe 2 doors down from the Greek restaurant and Mary and Rob's. I'm actually up the street from Mary and Rob's. And I'm just visiting various chapters in the area.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have any guests?
I see another visiting Rotarian.
Oh, we do. That's right. The governor. Governor, would you like to say a few words?
I am, as always, very excited to be joining your club. Your club is one of my favorite clubs. I was assistant governor when Marsha Hunt was the president. I love this club, the energy, the enthusiasm, and it's a vibrant club. And thank you for having me today. I'm excited to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Fulcan?
I have a guest, Peter Johnson, who's a good friend of mine. Grew up in Westwood Hills. He's just retired from a long stint as a teacher of English at Pacific Palisades High School. And he's a good friend of mine and a good friend of Tom Gibbons, our speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Welcome, Peter.
Hi there, everybody.
Furkan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Furkan Yalsan. This is my second Rotary Club meeting ever. I attended last week's meeting and I really enjoyed it. I'm a West Side local, born and raised, and I'm a UCLA graduate and current president of the North Westwood Neighborhood Council. So I'm excited to be here and thank you for having me.
Wonderful.
Welcome.
Welcome. Tom Barron, you had announcements today.
Well, I do. This is regarding our September 9th first person-to-person meeting. We'll be meeting at the Luskin Center, and the Luskin Center has a particular rule that requires us to commit to X number of people prior to the meeting. Unfortunately, we have to do that by Friday before the Thursday meeting. So we're going to have a good program. We're going to have members, not an outside speaker, but members making presentations. It'll be a lot of fun. But on this list, it's called the RLP, the regular lunch participant list. All active members will be on this list, unless there's some reason why you wouldn't want to be. And this is the list from which we will say that you're going to be attending the in-person meeting unless you opt out. And for instance, Gail and Kurt Smith are up in Tahoe a lot. So they say, Tom, don't put me on the list, but I will tell you when we're going to be there. So I need to know the exact count, because that Friday I give to the Luskin Center X number of people. Let's say it's 38. And if only 30 show up, then we have to pay for 8 additional people. So it's important that I know who will be attending and who will not. And Kurt's going to, and Gail, if they're in town and they're going to meet me, they'll let me know. Otherwise, they're not on the list. But if you don't show up and you're an active member, except for some exempt members, but if you're on the list, then you will pay the $52 lunch fee unless you tell me ahead of time you're not going to be on. And then we'll give you a credit the following quarter. That's very important. If you have any problems or any concerns about that, let me know. But essentially, you've got to give me an email or a telephone call the Friday before the next Thursday. Like if you're on vacation out of town, just let me know and you'll get a credit for that. Otherwise, you're going to be advanced billing for the luncheon meeting. And that starts on September 9th when we have our first back in-person meeting at the Luskin Center. Any questions? I presume, Mike?
Do we have any questions? I can't see the full, everybody's picture. So
Mike is muted.
I thought
Mike is muted.
Mike's on mute, so I thought he raised his hand. There you go.
Yeah, I thought, Tom, it was a buffet. Are they trying to alter that at all because of the increase in COVID?
No, it's going to be a buffet, and I'm sure if you show up and you weren't counted, there'll be enough food. But it's the commit that I'm worried about, that if you don't show up, and we've committed to that, we have to bill for that luncheon. So that's the important thing. It is a buffet, and it's going to be the buffet of the day at the Luskin Center. So that's the way it goes.
Thank you.
Tom? Tom?
Another question. Go ahead.
Yeah, have we changed our policy? In other words, I thought we were billing in advance. And did you pay for the lunch whether you go or not?
You will be billed in advance. And if you don't show up, you'll be obligated to pay for that lunch. But you get a credit. If you tell me you're not coming and you know you're not going to be there, just let me know. And you get a credit the following quarter for the luncheon cost, $52.
So that is a change of policy then.
Well, it is a change of policy, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm listing here what our next meetings are so that you all see we're going to be going every other in-person meeting. So is it the second and the fourth meeting will be in person, Tom? At the Luskin
September 9th will be the first one, and September 23rd will be the second one. It's basically the first and third meetings of the month. Now, I will send out a list of all those on the RLP, the regular lunch participant list, and you can get back to me whether you want to be excluded from that or not. But essentially, it's all active members of those exempt members who normally appear, who normally attend, or an honorary member who normally attends. But the first and third, and I'll send out a list as well of all in-person meetings for the entire year. We have them already scheduled, so you'll know exactly, you put on your calendar when you have to be at the Luskin Center and which ones are via Zoom.
Marcia, you have a question?
Yeah, I see on September 16th, it's a Zoom meeting hosted by Lenny Friedman.
Well, we don't have a host for that one, so I just stuck Lenny's name.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe there was information I didn't know about.
Remember who's putting this up, Marcia.
Yeah.
My mother used to say, consider the source. Okay. Any other questions for Tom? All right, we're moving on. Every time we have one of these meetings, it takes a lot of Rotarians to put it all together. So I want to thank everybody here who helped put all this together. And in the background, I can tell all of you, it's the backbone of our Rotary Club. We're so grateful to have them. Tom Barron and Diane Good, and they are working overtime in the background while we have Nancy's sabbatical. And so I want to thank all of them and everybody else that was involved with keeping our meetings going. Not to mention John O'Keefe, who took on programs this year. Big job, John.
Thank you.
My hats off to you.
Got a long way to go, but okay, thanks.
Okay. Do we have anybody from Rotaract here today? Nobody from Rotaract? Well, okay, we want to have closer ties with our Rotaract Club. If you are interested in attending their events or receiving their weekly bulletins, just get in touch with Carson and she'll get you on the email list. An incredible Rotaract Club. And they are something like 80 or 100 strong, and they're doing something good in the community every single week. Local announcements on the district level. You can find this at the district website, rotary5280.org. First of all, we have our district breakfast coming up. You can register at the website. District breakfast is coming up on August 24th, 8 o'clock in the morning. So please register and attend the district breakfast. Mark Zanuck, who is the chief economist for Moody's, will be there, which is a numbers kind of an event, which is what I enjoy. I plan to be there. Also coming up is club development training, August the 14th, day after tomorrow, 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. You can register at the district website. We have a foundation education series coming up. And you can register on the website. And walking into my den right now is one of the most esteemed members of the Beverly Hills Rotary Club. Look at this. With a virtual, Barry, it locks you out. There you are.
Howdy.
Barry Bernstein from Beverly Hills Rotary Club.
The #1 club. LA5 is certainly not. And with your president, you are up there.
Our next, what I want to mention on the district level is that you can go to find new speakers that the district now has a directory for, and as well as you can attend other club meetings. We were talking about this in the social time ahead of time, but it's actually a lot of fun to attend other clubs, their meetings, how they have their meetings, various guest speakers. It's a terrific part of the benefits of being a member of a Rotary Club. If you have a question or whatever, you're going to have to speak up because I can't see everybody other than Ed Galt eating. I can't see everybody's hand up if anybody has a question. Finally, I want to always mention my two favorite Rotarians.
Oh.
The first Rotarian, because we need to be calm. The second one, past President Ed Galt, because he asked me to be a member of Rotary. So with that, John, would you like to introduce our guest speaker for the day?
I'm glad to do that. I'm delighted to be introducing Father Tom Gibbons. His official name is Father Thomas Gibbons, CSP. That stands for Congregation of St. Paul's. That means he's a Paulist priest. The Paulists are an all-American order that was founded in the 1850s in New York City. Father Tom is from northern New Jersey. He went to college at Loyola University of Maryland. That's one of four Jesuit colleges in the country that are named Loyola. I went to one of them myself, Loyola Chicago. He graduated in 1994. And after graduating, he went in something called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps in Phoenix, Arizona, where you do a year of volunteering in some area of the country that needs some help. And then he did some other volunteer work along the border in El Paso, Texas. And then he moved back to Baltimore, where he'd been to college, and became a web designer, eventually working for the Catholic Relief Services as a developer. After doing that, he entered the Paulist Fathers around 2006. I may have that date wrong. Is that right, Father? Maybe
Yep, that's right.
Okay. And he was ordained a Paulist priest in 2012. And as a priest, he's a Paulist priest. He served in Toronto, Canada, and New York City before coming to Los Angeles. Currently, he's a vice president and director of development and production for Paulist Productions in LA. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them in a minute. But he has been making Paulist Productions. At Paulist Productions, he's been making films, made a film about Isaac Hecker, who was the founder of the Paulist Fathers in 1855, and also Father Elwood Kaiser, who was the founder of Paulist Productions. And Father Tom is currently working on a film about Saint Junipero Serra, which is what he's going to talk about today. Now, just a brief word about Paulist Productions, where Father Tom works, on which boards Tom Barron and myself serve of Paulist Productions. Paulist Productions creates films and television programs that challenge viewers to love one another and consider the effect when we strive to achieve the basic principles of faith in our modern world. Father is going to speak about a film that he's making at Paulist Productions about Saint Junipero Serra. So Father Tom, you're on.
Well, thanks for that, John, and thanks to the Rotary Club for having me. I think this is the second time I've had the privilege of speaking to this particular group. I think I was with a couple. I was at 2018. I think it was myself and the minister Drew Sams from Bel Air Presbyterian. I think we were talking about religion in the modern era. So it's great to be back here talking with everybody, although in a much more virtual setting than the comforts of UCLA, but it's good to be here nonetheless. We've got a lot of great projects going on, but one of the ones that we're working on that we're really excited about, I think it's really hitting a nerve with a lot of Californians, is I know all of us know that about a year ago, when George Floyd died, it really brought forward in the whole country a really renewed discussion on civil rights in America, race relations in America. And I remember some of us were sitting back thinking, all right, well, there's this big discussion that's going on. What's the Catholic take on this discussion? What do we have to contribute? What can Paulist Productions contribute? And then, as many of us remember, the statues of Junipero Serra started coming down. The Franciscan friar who founded the mission system in what in Alta California and what eventually became the state of California. And we're thinking, oh, that's the Catholic connection to what's going on with all this. And so we thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to explore the question of Saint Junipero Serra? And as John shared, I'm from the state of New Jersey. I had no idea who Junipero Serra was. I had heard a little bit of a controversy a couple of years ago, but I didn't really know what it was all about. And so when I started seeing this, I just didn't know what was going on. And and a lot of Native Americans feel many Native Americans feel very passionately one way about the issue of Serra's statues, and a lot of Native Californians and Catholics feel the opposite, way, and very passionately. I understand that many people who went to school in California learned about Junipero Serra as the founding father of California. So naturally, a lot of Californians got upset when the statues started coming down in a variety of ways. And then I had to think, well, being from New Jersey, if people tore down statues of Bruce Springsteen, I'd be really upset myself. But you know, or if they tore down statues of Frank Sinatra, you know, I'd be losing my mind. But you know, I kind of was like had like a little bit of a detachment to this because I could see, you know, being a Northerner, I could kind of see why Confederate statues were coming down, but I really didn't know what was going on behind that. And I think one thing that many of us can probably relate to is it just seems like so much in our national discourse or when we talk about issues, we, you know, especially over the last number of years, we've been kind of approaching our debates and our discussions from what I call like a Miller Lite style of debates. Many of us, if not most of us, can remember the old Miller Lite commercials where one side of the stadium is yelling "tastes great" and the other side of the stadium is yelling "less filling." And, you know, I feel like so many of our discussions, of our political discussions or historical discussions have almost like devolved into like a Miller Lite style of debate where everyone's just yelling "tastes great, less filling, tastes great, less filling." And so I was thinking, well, you know, what is, you know, I'm you know, obviously I'm a Catholic priest. So from a, you know, it's I'm kind of curious. So who is this, you know, person who's been named a saint in our church? And who's this person who has such a strong legacy in California? But I'm also a little bit of a historian. And I'm just like, so what's the real story going on? What's the debate we're having and the discussion we're having underneath the debate? Like, why are we yelling "tastes great" and less filling at one another? So we thought, wouldn't it be great to really explore this project and really explore the story of Junipero Serra and the story in a way to kind of see if we can bring all the different sides of this issue together in a way in which we could all kind of hear one another out. And also maybe in a way so we can start to think about new ways how we can approach questions like this. So I know like one of the questions we were asking is, you know, when is it okay to judge the past and when do we need to defend the past? When is it fair to, you know, say, hey, you know, what this person did was wrong? And also, you know, when is it unfair to judge people in the past based on the values of the present? And then, you know, I think also, you know, on a larger religious concern is just how do we heal? How do we heal as a society? How do we heal as a state? How do we heal with Native Americans who may feel a sense of hurt? And just, you know, we thought this would just be a really great opportunity to explore these questions. I think one of the great things about the history of Paul's Productions is we've always tried to explore projects that seek to this is kind of my phrasing, that seek to advance the conversation between the sacred and the secular. How do we hold a big enough table so we can have people talking with one another instead of at one another and hopefully come to a deeper sense of truth, a deeper sense of healing. And so we've started production. We thought this would be a great topic to explore. So we started doing some interviews with some of the top scholars of Junipero Serra in the country. So we've talked with Dr. Robert Sankiewicz of Loyola Marymount University. No, I'm sorry, Santa Clara University up in San Jose. We've talked with Dr. Ruben Mendoza in Monterey, California. And we're going to be talking with other Serra scholars, but we're also going to be talking with people, you know, who bring the Catholic perspective, some Franciscans who know a lot about Serra, but we also are reaching out and are going to be talking to Native American leaders who may have a different perspective on Spanish colonization as a way to kind of like, hey, let's really unpack this story and let's see, you know, let's just see, you know, are the complaints about Junipero Serra correct? Are they incorrect? Are they muddled in the middle? And how can we move forward? So what I'll do is I didn't bring any slides with me today, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link in the chat room, and that has the link to our to kind of our initial film, and it has what's on there called a sizzle reel. And the sizzle reel it's not a trailer. It's kind of a, hey, this is the direction of the film we're looking to go in. So, feel free to check that out at your leisure. But we're really hoping to kind of build up a movement and really let people know. We're looking at as many people know, it's one of the challenges in this time is how do we distribute this to as many people as possible? So it's not just, one group of listeners only hear one message and another group of listeners only hear another message, but how do we really create we're looking at doing some virtual screenings in a way in which we can invite multiple parties to view this project as we develop it, to participate in this project, whether it's like financially or different resources, and also just to kind of help with the PR. But I know from someone who's grew up out of state, it's just been fascinating. Just as soon as I mentioned the words Junipero Serra, it's something everybody's got an opinion on. I'll talk to 5 different people and get 8 different opinions on it, and which is good. That means there's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of desire to move forward and hopefully to really kind of do some good and to bring forth some healing and to bring forth some discussion in which we all kind of move forward to that next step of whether it's reconciliation, fuller understanding of the past, fuller appreciation of the past for everybody involved. So that's kind of my initial spiel. But as what I've always whenever I start talking about this topic, I always notice that a lot of people have questions. So I'm definitely open to hearing any questions and starting a discussion on what we're trying to do.
Father Tom, just a comment, not a question. Miller
Sure.
Lite, both less filling and taste great.
I'm more of a Sam Adams man myself, so I go for both.
Father, can you go into any greater detail about what some of the real negative thoughts or feelings about Father Serra or Saint Serra are, making from Native Americans and others? Because there's a lot of negative, as we talked about earlier, a lot of negative feeling about him.
Well, what I think, as I'm kind of starting to do my research, I think what's starting to become apparent is that there are many historians who, when they start looking at the literal story of Father Junipero Serra, they actually said overall he was a pretty good guy. He was a complex guy. He was somebody who was definitely of his own time. But in many ways he was he was a defender of the Indians in many areas in which I don't think he's been getting sufficient credit for in a lot of mainstream media. But I think what happened, what I'm as I talk to some of the scholars, what happened was he was somebody who in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, there was this kind of like mythology of Serra. So as as Americans were starting to settle California, he, like, some people thought, oh, well, let's make Father Serra the founder of California because he started all these missions there. So this kind of big mythology of what a great person Father Serra was for founding California started sprang up because he did found the mission system. And then in the 1960s, when there was more of a critical, and so Father Serra was kind of built up to be this great myth. And then in the 1960s, when there started to become a deeper appreciation for the violence that happened to many of the Native Americans, particularly in the late 1800s, with American settlement, and a lot of the real injustice that happened to the Native Americans who had been here for centuries beforehand. They looked at like who was the biggest target, and the biggest target was this myth of Junipero Serra. And so so when people started critiquing the past, they started throwing rocks at the biggest target they had, and the biggest target they had was Junipero Serra. And it's sometimes it's kind of funny when we talk about Junipero Serra as the founder of California. Sometimes we can think that Junipero Serra was walking around California going, okay, the Golden Gate Bridge is going to go over there and Disneyland's going to go down there. And then we'll have a tour at Universal Studios. Like that, like Junipero Serra was just founding missions because he really was passionate about the Catholic faith. He really wasn't trying to found a state. So it's really kind of like unpacking, you know, it's almost like Junipero Serra was probably made to be bigger than he actually was. But in recent years, he's been made to be smaller than he actually was. And so how do we kind of bring about some healing around not only the memory of Junipero Serra, but also the concerns that Native Americans, many Native American communities have about their heritage as well. Does that help, John?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I have a question. In general, I see
Yes, sir.
John. I've lost you. Anyway, I have a question. What do you think about tearing down statues in general by, you know, presumably this minority or that minority or some other group? When does that, doesn't that come under some form of judgment?
Are you asking me or John? I wasn't sure.
You, because
Yeah, you may.
John's
Yes,
picture was there. I couldn't help.
Okay. You know what? I think that what I don't think is healthy is I don't think it's healthy to just someone on their own grabbing a lasso on their own and just ripping it down. I think statues are, you know, and this is one of the things we want to explore because statues are such a big big signifier of what's important to a culture. So for one or two people to just decide, oh, we're going to tear this statue down because we don't like it. I'm not sure if that's a completely fair discussion. I don't think that's a fair action to take because it doesn't take in the concerns of there's no chance for the community to discuss the cultural value or the value of that a particular statue may maintain. And statues have a lot of different meanings to different people. So I think that's one of the things we want to look at is what is, you know, when we say what are the arguments we're having underneath this, it's like we want to say what does having this statue mean to this group of people? What does that statue have meaning to that group of people? I'm not in favor of mobs coming down and tearing down statues just because they feel like it. I don't think that's a healthy way to move forward. However, I also don't think that I think we also need to talk about the difference between particular statues that may reside on public land and statues that may lie on church land, on private land. So if a church wants to have a statue of Junipero Serra or someone else, that's the church, you know, and the church community decides they want to have that. That's the church's opinion. Like that, I don't think that's not up for discussion. I don't think it can be a discussion for that particular church. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, though, for us to, you know, as a society, we're always changing, we're always growing. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to say, hey, wait a minute, what were the values behind this statue going up? And then what were the values we wish to reflect now in our commonplace? So, like, for example, in my personal opinion, I think it's a little bit of an easier discussion when we look at Southern statues of Civil War heroes, Confederate Civil War heroes, and what effect that has on the Black community. It's basically, you know, 100 years ago, different cities wanted to put up statues that were defending the, you know, people who were trying to defend the institution of slavery. It's not surprising that many people in the Black community want to take that down. Should they just be ripped down en masse? I don't think that's the most productive way to do it. But I think that's where I think it's always important to kind of re-engage our history and to re-engage our history from a multivalent side, not just from the cause at the moment. So that question may sound a little wishy-washy because I don't think it's a but that's kind of the perspective I can kind of see. So sometimes it may be appropriate to take down a statue, but other times it may be like, hey, the statue means something else and something more, and we need to hold that up. So that's kind of my my middle of the road perspective.
There's a question from Steve Shearer.
Yep.
Yes, Father, this is a provocative topic, and I'm channeling Gordon Bell a little bit here. And the concept I'd like to explore with you is the idea of cancel culture. And I think I'll use an easy example probably of George Washington. And George Washington had slaves, but some people would take the position that without George Washington, the country wouldn't have been successful in the Revolutionary War.
Right.
And so as a priest, and as you deal with the good things and the bad things that all people do, how on earth are we fair to all people?
Right. And I think that's where, because you're completely right. It's like, the example I use is, or I joke sometimes, is that 100 years, as John O'Keefe will tell, I will probably be up for sainthood in the Catholic Church. I'm totally kidding when I say that. That's just a joke. But let's just pretend, for the sake of argument, I am. And then but every day I need to have a cold brew coffee. And so I go to Pete's Coffee or Starbucks coffee, and I get a plastic cup with my cold brew coffee, and I cannot start my morning without it. 100 years from now, we may be digging out from a sea of plastic. We may be like drowning, and people may be drowning in plastic. And then when they say, oh, Father Tom was such a holy guy, but he really contributed to this plastic sea that we're wasting in. He should not be a saint. Now, again, I'm not saying I'm a saint. I'm just being a little hyperbolic. Just to say, when is it fair to say, but even though I've been just an amazing human being for the rest of my life, when is that fair to say that? And I think I think, to be honest, I want to bring up cancel culture because I think there are, again, I think even cancel culture itself has many different roots in it. We have a very long history of cancel culture that all sides of the aisle have engaged in at one period or one time. People from one religious perspective will boycott this product because they stand for certain things, and then other people from another political perspective will boycott this project. I think, unfortunately, cancel culture has gotten hyper energized by social media. And I think that it's like that's been gasoline on wherever one's politics are coming from. And I think this is where, my kind of hope in kind of pursuing this project is, and I think social media kind of allows what I'll kind of say the ones and the tens, like if on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're a 1 over here or a 10 over here, the ones and the tens tend to get all the oxygen. And it's like, can the 6s and the 4s start having some more discussions? Can the 7s and the 3s, have some? Can we hear from some of the 5s? And because, but you're right, it's like no one is going to hold on. I mean, the reason why I have a job as a Catholic priest is because nobody's perfect. That's why I currently have a job. Nobody's perfect,
You'll continue to have that job too.
Exactly. I know. Right. At the same time, it's when do we judge the past? It's kind of like, I'm still pretty comfortable judging Adolf Hitler, and saying Adolf Hitler was not a plus for humanity. Where's the difference between, Adolf Hitler and somebody else? And I think sometimes we tend to talk about issues in binary terms as an either or, and it's just like, if we don't go into the complexities, unfortunately, I think those are the things that divide us. So that's kind of one of my hope with this, so we stop yelling Adolf Hitler at one another.
I have a little anecdote I wanted to state. Father Tom and I have talked about this. There was a man in LA, maybe about 20, 30, 40 years ago, in the Valley. I think his name was William Hannon.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a very successful real estate man in the Valley in particular. And when he died, he left a big estate, and there's a William Hannon Foundation. And William Hannon was a big fan of Junipero Serra. I'm not exactly sure how he got that feeling, but anyway, he donated, or maybe it was his foundation, donated a number of statues, full life-size statues of Junipero Serra around LA. I know a number of them were at Catholic churches, but there were in other places also, some private, maybe some public. But as of now, I think most of them have disappeared, and I don't know what's happened to them. I don't think they've been destroyed. I really don't know what's happened to them. One other point was in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. We have daughters up there, so we go up there a lot. There was a bigger than life size, maybe 1.5 times life size statue of Junipero Serra that was painted. There was people dumped paint all over it. Now, I don't know what's happened to that statue either, but anyway, that's what's happened to some of the statues that were around.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And I think that's the kind of vandalism that I don't think is productive for any conversation. And I think that's hopefully what we can also get behind, and just really explore it. I see Philip Gabriel has his hand up.
I'm a little bit kind of mystified. I don't think comparing your coffee drinking to what the Catholic Church did to the Indians 200 plus years ago really compares. I mean, they basically tried to wipe out their culture. They tried to wipe out their customs, their language. They moved them into, they put them into substandard living conditions, all in the name of teaching them the word of Christ. So, I mean, I don't think they would be worse off today if we had just left them alone and shared the resources. They would be fine. They didn't have to come in and just kind of wipe out the whole culture, the way of life. It's a pretty big deal. I mean, like when I was in the 70s, Christopher Columbus was considered a hero for inventing or discovering America, and that's in the past 50 years it's come out that he didn't really invent the United States, and he caused a lot. He caused a lot of problems for a lot of people.
Right.
And so they no longer celebrate Christopher Columbus Day. It's called Indigenous Day now, I think.
Yep.
So I don't think that the impact of what the church did to the Indians has really been fully kind of vetted.
And to be honest, that's what we're looking to explore. And I do want to backtrack and thank you for bringing that up. I think my coffee drinking was kind of like I wasn't trying to equate the two. Just, when we talk about like, how do we judge the past and when is it fair to do it? And when is it not fair? And when is it a little bit fair? I think those are, one of the things we really want to do is we really want to bring in the Native perspectives on this, because I think too often, partially because of social media and the way our media silos are set up, we tend to only hear the perspectives we want to hear. So frankly, if there's Catholics who may not have had a previous understanding of our church's role in what happened during Spanish colonization, I'm hoping that's a win, so that there's actually a deeper appreciation why there is anger out there and why there is that. So because that's the other thing is it's like sometimes as a church we can sometimes get so defensive of our culture of the Catholic Church, but we also have to remember that we're based on Jesus Christ and who's based on a spirit of love and justice, and sometimes as a church we haven't always lived up to that. And so really exploring when exploring those histories that don't fit as neatly into good, bad, as many have validly argued during the Spanish colonization period, I think is one of the things we want to explore as well.
So it sounds like you're willing to present both sides.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, you know, that, and I think that one of our struggles that we're working through is trying to present ourselves as much as possible as honest brokers, and to say, you know, yes, we're going to, you know, because my kind of personal hope for this is that we create it's kind of the open table of mutual sharing, and that means sharing of pain and sharing of history, and also just kind of like unpacking, and to say, hey, wait a minute, we were taught this, we were taught X, but Y is what actually happened, you know, and to really, you know, what does the historical argument say? So, but thank you for bringing that up too, because that's equally as important.
Thank you for your input. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to respond to one of the things that Phil said. Phil, when the holiday was changed from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, I think it is, presumably that was done by elected official or officials or elected body or something like that, rather than, you know, random people who got together and decided to do it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So there are ways to accomplish these things.
Mm-hmm.
I have a comment to add about Paulus Productions, and it's kind of like the evangelical business of Paulus Productions and looking at other religions. I grew up at St. Paul's with the Paulus priests in their early 60s, and Father Kaiser was there and started Paulus Productions, which was mentioned. And he used to have a show that started with vignettes that he would do an introduction, and maybe it was Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. or part of the Kennedy clan of actors and singers that would be in these vignettes, but they were a half an hour. And it became such a big deal that it aired on CBS in the half hour after 60 Minutes every night. And as it developed, and it wasn't a preaching of just Catholicism, it was a preaching of problems people are having and how are you going to deal with the family that's breaking up, or the alcoholism in the family, or whatever it was. And as this all developed, where he used to do the introduction, he started bringing in rabbis and all the other Christian faiths to do the introduction. And the show just took off for probably 10 years or so on CBS. And I've talked to Father Tom about this. I don't think he was even alive then. So, but I was kind of raised in this indoctrination. But what I've loved about that upbringing in the Paulus and Paulus Productions is it didn't shove just Catholicism down our faces. It was looking at the whole broad spectrum of all the religions and where we're similar and good for each other.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Great. Thanks, Michael. I hope, and you know, I'm not sure how much time I have for another pitch, but the documentary on the founder of Paulus Productions is going to be premiering at the Chinese theaters on September 10th. So if anybody wants more information on that, I'll be happy to. We're gonna have a really great a great screening of our latest documentary in a 1 month. 1 month from yesterday, or 1 month from 2 days ago. So 28 days.
You can, if you're interested, you can ask me about that and I can get you information.
Father, did I read somewhere you wrote a book about Junipero Serra?
No, I have not written a book. I've read a book.
Okay.
Which is not the same thing. I've read a book and I saw a YouTube clip. That's my background.
Got it. Any other questions for Father Gibbons? Okay, he has put on there the link, okay, HollywoodPreach.com.
And also sarahstatues.com, and Sarah Statues, if you want to sign up and receive updates on how our production is coming along. We're going to have something for like next summer is what we're looking to put something together for the Father Serra film.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of us still call him Father Serra, and we should be calling him Saint Serra because he's a saint. Now that's another story, of course, sainthood for him. But anyway, he is Saint Sarah.
When did that happen, John?
When did it happen? I think within the last couple of years. Isn't that right, Tom?
2015. 2015.
Yeah. It was quite a surprise from a lot of people because of the negative, sentiment about his treatment of the Native Americans, for example.
Right.
But he was canonized by the Pope, our current Pope, Pope Francis.
Okay. With that, I'd like to welcome Peter Moore, who is attending our meeting with 5 minutes to spare. Peter, welcome. Any more questions for Father Gibbons? Or is that Saint Gibbons?
No. couple years.
I have a question. I have one question.
Sure, go ahead, Dwight.
Yeah, I was racking my memory trying to remember what I had heard negative about the father. And at the same time, a couple months ago, I read Howard Zinn's book about the people's history of the United States. So I don't know if I'm attributing this act to him from somebody else, conflating the two characters or not, but I understand there's some very brutal techniques that he used to control the Indian population and sometimes punish them, including cutting off their hands.
Oh, God.
Which I think was considered brutal in just about any time in our past. Am I conflating someone else with him, or?
Yeah, actually, that would be a conflation. No, he never engaged in anything like that. And many Native American communities to this day still actually have a deep appreciation for Junipero Serra and how he treated them. There are some times in which I think there's only like a couple of occasions where like he kind of gave an okay for whippings. And I think that's a more complex process, but that was more for natives who may have run off or done something else as kind of like a corporal punishment, which was standard in the day. That doesn't mean it's right, or, it just means that's what it was.
When you say run off, does this mean they were slaves?
No, they were not slaves, but this is where it gets a little tricky, and this is where I think a lot of people do have concerns about Junipero Serra's legacy, in which if people decided to fully become Christians, there was this idea that they had to live and be at the mission. So if they changed their minds, it was kind of like, in Sarah's mind, you're like, oh no, if you leave Christianity, your mortal soul is in danger. So he would try to bring them back. Now, of course, we would look at that today and say that's nuts.
It's a cult. Today it's a cult.
Yeah, so that would be a little cultism, and we have more modern religious understandings where that's not how evangelization is done today, and that's. However, I think what largely happened was, I think there are many scenarios that really happened in the late 1800s, where yes, the Spanish were not always the best to the native communities. And I think there's a lot to critique for the Spanish. The Catholic Church was just kind of maybe riding on top of that in order to advance its own concerns with evangelization. I think, what often happened was it was really in the late 1800s when the Americans started settling California, and that's when you see like a lot more of the vicious extermination. We'll give you $100 for each scalp. And I think what happened is that there was a lot of conflation. I think there are things to praise Sarah for. I think there are things to fault Sarah for. But I think a lot of times what's happened when we just use the Sarah brush as a really big brush and conflate what happened in the late 1800s when the U.S. government started settling California with the Spanish colonization. Not to say that Spanish colonization was perfect, not to say Father Sarah is perfect, but that's one of the things we want to like just kind of like untie the ball of yarn a little bit more as well. Does that help?
Well, it depends on which anecdotes you believe, and like Zen. A lot of people think Zen is crazy, but my first introduction to him a few months ago was really an eye opener, because I had my civics and history lessons back in the 50s.
Yeah.
And boy, I mean, the white man could do no wrong. Period.
Right.
Period. I mean, the books were just crap, absolute crap. And my son tells me that every time I see him.
Yep. Well, and I think that's what, and I think that's why we're going to like really good historians, people who have studied the original documents. Like we're not bringing in people who are just bringing in hearsay. I'm not saying Zen is doing that. I actually have not read Zen, so I can't comment on that. But we are talking to people who really, from Catholic universities, from secular universities, and all the ones I've talked to have a really strong base of the historical record that they're and are willing to be just as critical of anybody, regardless of their background, including the church at times. But it's always going to be based on what do the historical records say. So,
okay, we have to wrap this up. We have the end of our meeting here. Father, I want to thank you very much for attending and giving us your time and sharing with us. Thank you very much. On behalf of and in honor of you on your time, there will be a donation made to the Friends of the Westwood Library in your name.
Oh, thank you.
It's
right next to our office building, so that's great.
That works. Okay, so anybody interested in getting in touch regarding that September 10th screening should call or give a text message or a shout out to John.
That's fine. I'll be glad to take care of that, please.
Okay. Okay, next week, John is back with us, along with Susan Rice for an interesting, what's the topic, John, next week for the speakers? Philanthropy. Excellent. Right. Okay. And our host next week is going to be past president and future president, Chris Gaynor. He'll be our host for one of our last Zoom meetings of the year. Chris, thank you very much. And with that, I turn the baton over to Chris. I thank everybody. If there's no other comments, we'll close our meetings. Anybody have any further announcements? Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, boy. Hello, boy.
All
right. Since I guess you're still there, John, when does somebody become a saint with their first name versus saint with their last name?
When does one become a saint for their first name?
Followed by their surname or followed by their given name? Because I put up a question that says, so we have St. Francis, St. John, St. Paul, and so forth. Shouldn't we have St. Junipero?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's St. Junipero Serra, not St. Sarah. St. Junipero Serra.
Okay. Thank you.
That's how we do it, I think.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night, Edwin.